the issue with the WNBA, and I'm going to repeat a mantra. It is the most unlikable league and culture in all of sports by far. And I'm talking from the players to some of the ownership, to all the media members, to the podcasters, to those who defend it. It's the most unlikable league in the whole wide world. And this is just another piece of evidence to support that.
The WNBA was supposed to have discovered its savior, a once-in-a-generation talent, a household name before she even set foot on a professional court. A player so magnetic she filled arenas and shattered TV records from the moment she arrived. But instead of honoring her, the league did the unthinkable. It turned its greatest gift into its biggest liability. The truth is harsh. Behind the highlight reels and polished press conferences lies a league fractured by politics. So toxic it's now being called the most unlikable culture in all of sports. And that judgment doesn't come from rivals or critics. It comes from how they've treated the one player who could have secured their future. Caitlin Clark's choice to walk away from a life-changing, multi-million-dollar deal wasn't a fluke. It wasn't the blunder some sports writers rushed to call it. And it certainly wasn't loyalty to a league that pays her pennies while cashing in on her name. It was something far more deliberate. A trap. A trap set so precisely that the WNBA walked straight into it with its eyes wide open. And now it has no way out. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the story the league doesn't want told. A story of sabotage, hidden agendas, and one star who outmaneuvered an entire organization. Because what Caitlin Clark just did may not only force the WNBA to answer for its corruption, it could bring the whole system crashing down. T.O. grasped the brilliance of Clark's move. You first need to understand the bait. And it was flawless. A brand new league called Unrivaled, co-founded by WNBA stars Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, had entered the scene. And when they approached Clark, they didn't come empty-handed. They came with what they proudly described as a Lionel Messi-style offer. Not just a contract, an empire. The numbers alone were staggering. More than $1 million for only 8 to 10 weeks of basketball. That's over 13 times Clark's rookie salary in the WNBA. A pitiful $76,535. To put it in perspective, she draws sellout crowds, record-breaking TV ratings, and millions in sponsorship revenue for the league. Yet she takes home less than a mid-level accountant. That isn't just unfair, it's insulting. But the deal didn't stop at money. Along with salary came something even more valuable: equity, ownership, a stake in the entire league. For the first time, Clark wasn't being treated as replaceable. She was being offered power, something the WNBA has never dared to give her. Even one of Unrivaled's founders admitted what everyone already knew: Caitlin Clark was being exploited. They openly said she should be one of the highest paid players in the world for the numbers she delivers. That wasn't speculation, it was confession. Proof the WNBA was happy to use Clark as a marketing machine, while refusing to reward her so when this deal surfaced. The assumption felt obvious. She'd accept. Of course she would. Why wouldn't she? More money, more respect, more freedom. It was the perfect escape hatch from a league that treated her like an ATM while tossing her pocket change.
Another reason why Caitlin Clark needs to flee the WNBA. It's a political organization. They're not serious about business. That they don't care about traditional sports fans. It's a little cult that puts out little political statements and everybody wears vote t-shirts. They don't care about making money. They don't care really about building up this league and making it profitable. They're a charity. She needs to flee the WNBA and start her own.
But that's what made her next move so devastating. Instead of taking the bait, she walked away. When Caitlin Clark rejected the offer, the sports world froze. This wasn't just surprising, it was unthinkable. Who turns down $1 million salary and ownership in an entire league? Who rejects financial freedom, equity, and the chance to break free from a system that clearly resents them? The media scrambled to explain it. Some said she needed rest. Others insisted she wanted to focus on her rookie season. A few pointed to her endorsements, arguing she didn't need the money. But every single one of those takes missed the truth. Clark's rejection wasn't about exhaustion. It wasn't about endorsements. And it definitely wasn't about loyalty to the WNBA. It was about sending a message to why walking away from what looked like the perfect escape. Clark made her intentions clear. She wasn't chasing paychecks, she was chasing power. This wasn't a convenient decision. It was a declaration of war. While the WNBA was lost in politics, Clark was playing an entirely different game. A game that stretched far beyond basketball. She didn't just turn down Unrivaled's offer, she weaponized it. She sacrificed millions to expose something far bigger. The broken, hostile system that kept her trapped. And that's why her choice hit like a signal flare. Overnight, her story stopped being just about sports. That it wasn't about wins, losses, or even salaries. It was about something that drew attention far beyond basketball. Something powerful enough to shake the league to its core. What was that signal? It was the sound of the federal government stepping in. The moment Caitlin Clark turned down that offer, the story exploded out of the sports pages and into the national spotlight. Suddenly, it wasn't just about a superstar rejecting millions. It was about mounting evidence that she was being targeted, exploited, and silenced inside the very league that depended on her. That's when the federal government was called to act. A former White House staffer, Sean Mullen, publicly demanded a federal investigation into the WNBA, declaring that Clark was the victim of a textbook hostile work environment. Not just tough play, not just rookie hazing, but a systemic campaign of abuse the league allegedly enabled. The evidence was damning. In her very first season, Clark was reportedly hit with 6 flagrant fouls, a total some veterans never reach in their entire careers. She was blindsided by body checks, shoved to the floor by Kennedy Carter, and taken down hard by. Phoenix Mercury guard Sophie Cunningham admitted on record that the league's brightest star wasn't being protected. Think about that, not a fan, not a pundit, but a competitor acknowledging the truth. And yet, silence from the top. No serious suspensions, no meaningful fines, no public defense of Clark. The WNBA treated every foul, every shove, every injury as routine, while the player driving their record ratings was left to absorb the punishment. That's why claims of a hostile workplace hit so hard. They weren't speculation. The bruises were real. The injuries were real. And to many, the league's failure to act looked less like incompetence and more like complicity. But the targeting on the court was only part of the story. The politics reached even further, all the way to the Olympic stage. If the constant fouls raised suspicions, the Olympic snub erased any doubt. Because what happened there, supporters argued, wasn't about performance. That it was about politics. Leaked details from veteran journalist Christine Brennan's upcoming book revealed the truth. Caitlin Clark was never going to make the Olympic team. Not because she lacked talent, her stats and impact were undeniable, but because the decision had been rigged from the beginning. Her roster spot was sacrificed as a farewell gift to Diana Taurasi, a legend but a player long past her prime. This wasn't about assembling the best team to represent the United States. It was about protecting the old guard, rewarding loyalty, and keeping out the one player whose stardom threatened to eclipse them all. And the reasoning was even worse than the outcome. Officials reportedly feared the backlash if Clark were included, but didn't get enough minutes. Think about that. Instead of letting her prove herself on the biggest stage, they shut her out completely. Because she was too good, too popular, too undeniable. The message was unmistakable. This wasn't about competition. It was about control. When Clark's Indiana Fever coach, Christy Sides, delivered the news, Clark's response wasn't anger or defeat. It was a warning. She said simply. They woke a monster. That wasn't just defiance, it was prophecy. Because the league's attempt to humble her only revealed how fragile their power truly was. And once that monster woke, there was no putting it back to sleep. What happened next proved exactly how much the WNBA needs Caitlin Clark, and how quickly the system crumbles without her. For years, the league brushed off criticism with the same excuse. We're still growing, give us time. But the moment Clark arrived, that excuse died. The numbers told a story no PR spin could erase. With Clark on the court, the WNBA reached unprecedented heights. Her games averaged 1.81 million viewers. Arenas sold out. Teams had to move to bigger venues just to fit the demand. Merchandise sales exploded. For the first time in decades, the WNBA wasn't just making the sports section. It was dominating national headlines. But the moment she stepped away, everything collapsed. During the 10 games Clark missed due to injury, Ratings didn't dip, they fell off a cliff. Viewership plummeted by 55%, dropping to just 847,000. That's not a slump. That's a freefall. The kind of collapse that terrifies networks, advertisers, and sponsors. And here's the brutal truth. The WNBA isn't surviving because of the league. It's surviving because of Caitlin Clark. One player, single-handedly holding up an entire organization. And the WNBA knows it. The networks know it. Her rivals know it. And yet, instead of protecting her, building the league around the one star capable of carrying it into the future, they've treated her like an inconvenience, a cash machine to be drained without ever giving her the respect, protection, or influence she deserves. It isn't just short-sighted. It's self-destructive. Because the numbers don't lie. Without Caitlin Clark, the WNBA isn't just weaker, it's irrelevant, and that's why her decision to reject the $1 million escape hatch wasn't foolish. It was strategic. In that moment, she proved her fight wasn't about chasing money. It was about something far bigger. She didn't walk away from power. She created it. On the surface, her rejection looked insane. $1 million, equity in a brand new league, freedom from WNBA politics, gone with a single no. But the brilliance wasn't in what she lost. It was in what she gained. Because that rejection was never about money. It was about leverage. By turning down Unrivaled's offer, Clark flipped the entire narrative. She wasn't just another athlete chasing a paycheck. She became the athlete willing to sacrifice millions to prove a point. And that point cut straight to the WNBA's heart. The system is broken, and she refuses to be complicit. Think about how devastating that was for the league's image. For months, critics said Clark was being exploited. For months, fans begged the league to treat her better. But when she herself rejected $1 million payday, the whispers became undeniable. No athlete walks away from that kind of money unless something deeper is at stake. Her rejection turned a simmering controversy into global headlines. It amplified whispers of a hostile work environment into a roar the league could no longer silence. And it gave credibility to calls for federal intervention. Because if the face of the sport was willing to burn a fortune just to make a statement, then the problem had to be real. In one move, Clark reframed the story. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the executioner. She didn't just reject Unrivaled's bait. She weaponized it, using her own sacrifice as proof that the fight wasn't about her bank account. It was about tearing down a corrupt system. And that's when the second phase began. Because as Clark sparked the crisis, the WNBA Players Union saw their moment to strike. Her decision didn't just dominate headlines, it created the perfect storm. For years, players had grumbled about pay, conditions, and respect. But nothing changed because contracts were locked until 2027, and the league always held the leverage. Until Clark blew the doors off. Almost immediately after her rejection went national, the Players Union announced the unthinkable. They were opting out of the collective bargaining agreement early. A deal meant to last 3 more years was torn apart in one statement. Union President Nneka Ogwumike didn't mince words. She called it a defining moment, warning that players could no longer afford patience. Translation: the gloves were off, and make no mistake, this wasn't coincidence. It was coordination. Clark's sacrifice gave the union undeniable proof. They could point to her story and say, if the league is exploiting the player who carries all of us, what chance do the rest of us have? It was the perfect weapon. The union turned Clark's rejection into a rallying cry, justifying their nuclear option. And in doing so, they created an existential crisis. Because without a collective bargaining agreement, everything is on the table. Revenue sharing, salary caps, endorsements, TV money, all of it. The players weren't asking anymore. They were demanding. Suddenly, the WNBA was squeezed from both sides. On the outside, federal investigators circling, armed with allegations of a hostile workplace, civil rights violations, and claims that Clark had been deliberately targeted. Subpoenas could expose years of internal emails, backroom conversations, and policies the league never wanted revealed. And if even half of it proves true, the cover-up may look worse than the abuse. On the inside, the players' union, ready to burn the system down. By shredding the agreement, they signaled war. If the league doesn't give them a fair share, they will shut the entire operation down. And caught in the middle is the very player the league tried to humble, now holding more power than anyone in its history. Caitlin Clark has transformed from the WNBA's golden goose into its greatest threat. The system designed to control her is being dismantled by her. Inside league offices, the panic is palpable. Do they admit failure, protect their star, and beg for forgiveness? Or do they double down, unleashing media allies to smear Clark as selfish, difficult, and even dangerous to the game she's saving? Every path forward is a gamble. None are safe. Because the truth is out. The numbers are out. And the public is watching. The WNBA wanted Caitlin Clark as its savior. Instead, by underestimating her, it may have created its own executioner. The league thought it could control Caitlin Clark, cash in on her star power while keeping her boxed inside the same broken system every other player endured. But in trying to humble her, they woke something they can't put back to sleep. Her rejection of Unrivaled wasn't a mistake. It was the masterstroke, a sacrifice that turned whispers into headlines, quiet frustration into a player revolt, and forced the federal government to stare straight at the league's ugliest secrets. Now, the WNBA stands at a crossroads. On one side, investigations that could expose years of corruption and abuse. On the other, a union rebellion demanding a complete financial overhaul. And right at the center is the one player they can't silence. The one they need most. The one they tried to break. Caitlin Clark didn't just refuse the bait. She turned it into a weapon. And that weapon could burn the entire system down. The question now isn't whether the WNBA can survive this storm. It's whether it can survive Caitlin Clark. Because the monster they woke isn't going back to sleep.